So I'm Michael Rice. I'm going to be talking to you about the vCenter simulator. So stop testing your scripts in production and meet your good buddy, the vCenter simulator. Just a little bit up front about this. This is completely unsupported by VMware and Rackspace and me and anybody. So you're on your own if you follow this. So why do people test their code in production? Sometimes they're in a hurry. Sometimes production is just a little bit more convenient than anything else. Maybe you don't have a lab. Maybe your lab doesn't even remotely match anything that you have in production. Lab, what's that, right? Some of us don't even have access to any kind of lab gear. So we test in production. Ultimately, we're trying to avoid this anyway, right? So the last thing we want is to write something, it gets deployed, and then we start getting calls, hey, this didn't work. Well, it worked fine in dev, right? So that brings us to the simulator. How can we avoid these? So we use the vCenter simulator. So vCenter simulator is a little tool included in the vCenter server appliance, starting with 5.1, that you can go in and you can configure, and it will spin up a mock virtual center environment. So you'll have hosts, virtual machines, resource pools, really just about anything you can think of inside of this, this fake environment that's all available right there with very little RAM and CPU required to make this happen. And most of your API calls should work just fine inside the simulator. You can't do everything though because it is mocked, so there's not going to be any way to log into a virtual machine to do any of your guest customizations, but you can power on, power off, take snapshots, reboot, add hosts, remove hosts, etc., things like that, resize. All of those operations are going to work just fine. If you have reports that you need to do for management to find out how many virtual machines do you have in your environment, how many CPUs do they have, how much memory is being used, you can test those scripts with simulator. So it's been included with vCenter Server Appliance since 5.1, and you can start using it. It's gotten a lot better in 5.5. I really like it. So what you can do is you can log in, spin up your vCenter Server Appliance, log in, edit a couple of config files, start the simulator, and then it just starts cranking and going and going, and next thing you know, you've got this fully populated inventory. And this is very handy if you're writing scripts or libraries where you need to do constant testing and regression testing, because you're going to be able to configure in an automated way. Your vCenter will come up the same way, it'll be automated, and it'll have the same inventory every time you need to run it. And so we've got some bad news with that though, because it's broken now in 6.0. I reported this bug back in the beta testing of vCenter 6.0, and it's broken, unfortunately. So you can't use it anymore on 6, but you can still use it on 5. So I strongly suggest using it on 5.5. And I'm really hoping that VMware will step up and fix this. But William Lamb posted on his blog that they're not going to. But I think if we all rally together and say, hey, we need this, fix it, maybe they'll fix it. Maybe they'll make it a fling, I don't know. Anything we can do to get this project brought back. But I'd really like to see that come back. So we use it very heavily in PyVMommy for all of our functional testing. I use it for another project called Java, all the functional testing for that. We hit testing out our service instances, all those kind of things. They get created, destroyed, and then we're able to record the XML and share that out with everybody. And if people file bugs, if they're able to reproduce it on a simulator, they can give me the steps, I can spin it up, I can get that bug fixed right away without having to, well, what does your environment look like? Things like that. So it's also pretty handy if you, if you're the kind of person that has a larger environment, but you can't afford a large lab. Maybe you can only afford, 1 or 2 systems for you to do your testing on, but your production environment has hundreds of host systems, thousands of virtual machines. How do you get a lab that looks like that? It's very expensive, so you can spin that up in simulator, and you can run that from like a MacBook Pro with 16 gigs of RAM and an i7, and you can have yourself like 2,000 or 3,000 virtual machines with hundreds of hosts all running in memory. So it's very, very handy, very powerful tool. Some helpful resources that I've found since I started using Simulator was William Lamb's blog, virtuallyghetto.com. And then I created a tool called SimDeplower. It's a Python tool because it's very similar to Vagrant, except it only works with Fusion or Workstation, and it's made just for deploying simulators. And so you run this tool, all you've got to have is the OVA downloaded, point it at the OVA, give it a destination for where you want it deployed on the file system, and it'll just spin that puppy up and automatically provision it with a default inventory. So right off the bat, you'll get 64 virtual machines, 8 host systems, and 8 resource pools, something like that, all in a cluster, all in one data center. And then, if that's not big enough for you, or you need something smaller or larger, you can adjust that as needed. So, thank you very much.